Developing the sequel to a radical departure for a decades-old franchise has to be difficult. That next game has to be bigger, it has to be better, and it has to follow up on what made that initial pivot meaningful by being even more powerful in the next entry. Wolfenstein: The New Colossus manages to be that larger step deeper into a new direction for the franchise, bringing in a more rebellious, more punk, more violent chapter in the reboot saga, while continuing Machine Games' work in redefining what Wolfenstein could be for new audiences, and progressing their vision for how a modern first-person shooter should play. The New Colossus continues in that regard by elevating the gameplay seen in the New Order, making everything faster, more personal, heavier, and even cooler while bringing together a narrative that deepens the character of William Blazkowicz and expanding him well past what was established in the previous entry. This video is continuing my coverage on Machine Games entries with the Wolfenstein franchise, being the second video in a 3-part series that will wrap up with covering Young Blood. If you haven't watched it already, I would recommend going back to check out my video on the New Order, which also features its expansion, The Old Blood, as this is a direct follow-up to that video in both the game that I'm covering and in influencing how I speak about this title with it being a sequel. In that video, I talked about the history of the Wolfenstein franchise and how the New Order was a new direction for the series, focusing on a more grounded and melodramatic presentation of the alternate history setting that the games tackle. I don't want to repeat myself too much with that point, but the New Colossus is an extension of that idea and one that pushes it even further than the New Order ever could, thanks in part to its convenient timing and direct messaging against real-world issues and developments in our social climate. With its 2017 release, the New Colossus came out at a tumultuous point, with a rampant rise of alt-right political views in the US and the game's clear objective of killing Nazis to help the United States secure its freedom against a tyrannical regime. I sure wish it didn't feel like we should take a lesson from Blazkowicz these days. A large part of the New Colossus identity before the release of the game was then created on the foundation of that real-world opposition, with the game's primary marketing tagline becoming "Make America Nazi-Free Again," or another one stating "Not My America," directly opposing the shift seen in the United States with its then and current leadership and conveniently aligning with the game's narrative taking place in a twisted America held under Nazi control. Pete Hines, the head of marketing for Bethesda Softworks during this release, stated in an interview that, "We don't feel it's a reach for us to say that Nazis are bad or un-American," then later adding, "We're not worried about being on the right side of history here." But obviously, Machine Games, or their publisher, couldn't have predicted the political shift in the US or anywhere else. Arcade Berg, a senior designer for the game, stated, "There's absolutely an interpretation and commentary in the game on past history and humans, but we're not trying to make a daily commentary or trying to change what's happening currently." The New Colossus was always going to be a direct statement against the Nazi Party, just like its predecessor and just like the games that came before it in the Wolfenstein franchise. The New Colossus was just a lightning rod for discussion thanks to its release window and then current events, though it does take a strong stance against what was happening in the world that's clearly defined by characters throughout the story. But again, obviously, they couldn't have predicted what would be happening around the game's release. Despite all of that, I understand and respect that you might not be interested in the political side of a game's launch, so I promise that the focus of this video is the actual game that was delivered. The New Colossus thrives in being an upgrade from the game that came before it, and despite the conversations around it drowning out talking about the game itself, I think this is a sequel that delivers on being bigger, better, more personal, and more impactful.
You have no idea what it's like to suffer like I do.
The New Colossus continues the reimagining of B.J. Blazkowicz into a more insightful, introspective character and introduces insight into his upbringing to reflect the man that we play as, along with being a parallel and foundation for his perspective on the world that he's trying to fix. I love what the New Colossus does for Blazko. It makes him more human, even more than the New Order could, by introducing a weakness to him and giving him depth in how he views himself and why. The narrative takes Blazkowicz's internal struggles much more seriously this time around. There's less room for the macho man facade than the first game gave him, but I think that's a good thing for what the story is trying to say about Blazko and what's being accomplished for his character. The story again is almost single-handedly carried by Blazkowicz and the perspective that he shares with the player throughout the game, but his opinions and motivations are molded by the people around him, namely his partner, Anya, and the leader of the Resistance, Caroline, both of whom we met in the New Order, along with new faces for the audience in the relationship with his mother and father. These things will become clearer as we progress through through the story, but before we get into the narrative at large, I do want to give a clear spoiler and content warning for the rest of this section of the video. The story features a lot of heavier topics with domestic abuse, extreme racism, and a lot of gore and violence against characters front and center to not shy away from the impact on our characters and the player. All of these things are a critical part of the story that the new Colossus is telling, but if you're not interested in spoiling the narrative or it's seeming like too much for you, there's a time code on screen now as well as chapters specifically laid out in the description to skip forward in the video to my talking about the rest of the game. I also want to preface talking about the opening of the story with my desire to cover the introduction in full, then talking about it in detail with my own thoughts once the opening has finished to try and respect the pace and tone that it brings to the player. With that out of the way, let's take it from the top. The story begins immediately where the New Order left off, with Blazkowicz badly wounded and bleeding out at the top of Death's Head compound, while the Resistance initializes the launch of a nuclear device to level the area. We're stuck with Blazko as the rest of our group, the Kryzow Circle, enters the building to evacuate him from the area. BJ fades in and out of consciousness and remembers a night with his mother, Zofia, as she consoles him in bed, telling him that his father won't be coming home tonight and trying to comfort him despite how badly his father beat him earlier in the day. Waking back up, we see that the Circle has found Blazko and is trying to take stock of his situation, seeing that his intestines are pouring out of his body and that the blood loss might be too much for him to survive, though extracting him from the area while the nuclear device goes off to destroy the compound. Blazkowicz fades again, accepting his death and drifting into another memory of his mother praying in Hebrew, then showing him a family heirloom, an engagement ring that her family has had for generations, telling him that she hopes that he can meet someone someday that he would want to give the ring to, though she's interrupted by BJ's father entering the house as she quickly hides the ring and tells BJ that he needs to make sure that his father never finds it. The memory ends and Blazkowicz begins a monologue, something that we'll be seeing a lot throughout the story as Blazkowicz tries to convey his thoughts to the player and to himself to help him cope with the things around him. In this moment, he's asking his mother if she believes that he's been good enough to reach heaven, though another memory with his father creeps in and makes him believe that he deserves to go to hell. Blazko wakes up for another moment, seeing the Circle mid-operation while Anya begs them to save him and Caroline tells BJ to hold on. Another childhood memory begins of Blazkowicz hiding in the closet with his dog, while his father, Rip, looks for him as Zofia tries to stop Rip from hurting BJ again. Zofia begs that BJ doesn't deserve to be beaten again, but Rip insists that he does, having seen him with a young black girl, though putting it in much more harsher words than I would, if you catch my drift. Zofia again tries to cover for BJ by telling Rip that it's just a childhood crush, but Rip continues that by BJ even being around a black person, it brings shame to his name and his family, and that while Rip is trying to provide for his family and be an upstanding citizen, his son doesn't have any respect for him to keep their name clean by not being sweet on a black girl. Zofia tries to reason with Rip again, saying that they have to try and live better than being upset with one another constantly, and that he's not the only one struggling to keep things together for the family, though realizing that trying to calm Rip down won't stop him from pursuing BJ, changing her tune to ridiculing him on his failing business to try and direct his anger away from BJ and onto herself. Rip takes the bait, laying into Zofia and belittling her Jewish heritage for not being the financial boon that he thought it would be, and eventually smacking Zofia and kicking her while she lays unconscious on the ground, which upsets the family dog who bursts out of the closet to bite Rip, with Rip then throwing the dog against the wall and kicking it out of the room, now exposing a young Blazkowicz to Rip on his own. The player controls BJ as he tries to stop Rip's approach, throwing vases at him and trying to avoid his grasp, but inevitably Rip catches BJ and begins to choke him as he falls unconscious, telling BJ that if he can't be strong enough to fight for his life, then Rip will show him what it's like to have it taken away. As this memory fades with BJ's consciousness, Blazko wakes up in the current day to Caroline comforting him and asking him to continue resting, telling him that she will need his strength soon for what she has planned next. BJ falls asleep and wakes up again to Anya in the room visiting him, visibly pregnant and holding Blazko's hand to her stomach to feel their twins inside kicking. Blazkowicz relives a childhood trauma one more time, cutting into his father dragging him through the basement to tie his hands to a post and put a shotgun into his hands, instructing BJ to shoot the family dog to teach him a lesson about hard decisions in life and the burden that the white man has to uphold the right things and to correct other people, calling them a sick-minded people with dirty bodies, animals, and the queer. The player has control during this scene and has the ability to shoot Bessie or miss the shot, which I chose to do and results in Rip taking the gun to shoot the dog for himself and belittling BJ again. The memory ends with Blazkowicz and his mother burying the dog as Zofia tells BJ to try and focus on things ending better for him than how his life has begun. Blazkowicz wakes up one more time in the present day to the sound of a alarms on a ship, Ava's Hammer, the Nazi U-boat that was reclaimed by the Kreisau Circle in the New Order. Blasco looks at himself in the mirror, struggling to recognize the face that he sees and falling to the floor in his disabled and weakened state, then remembering something that his father tried to beat into him, that the old and weak are doomed in this world. Blazkowicz gets himself into a wheelchair to investigate what's happening on board, and a member of the Circle is shot in the doorway in front of him, leading into the first section of actual gameplay. There is a lot to unpack here, but I really love this opening, especially as a sequel to deepen our understanding of the protagonist. There's a philosophy in game design to get the player into the meat of the game as soon as possible, letting them play the core of the experience as early as you can and not whittling them down with details about the world, characters, or whatever else you want to establish. The idea is to try to sell the gameplay first and bring in the story second, but this idea can kind of be waved away with a sequel, I think, as you have an understanding of what gameplay to expect, and now the audience might be more invested in these characters the second time around, wanting to see more of them and what they've been up to or more of how the world has evolved. The new Colossus takes that expectation of gameplay and runs with it in creating this extended view of Blazkowicz's childhood, but it's not like this is a 4-hour prologue or anything. I think altogether these scenes run just under 10 minutes, so it doesn't overstay its welcome in my eyes, but it does more than enough to give us a foundation for what's being added to Blazkowicz in this sequel. And what is being added is great. This deepening sadness and trauma that Blazkowicz carries adds a lot to his character, giving us a better understanding of what's driven Blasco in this unending fight against the Nazis and any other forces of evil, seeing that his childhood has driven him into his own brand of righteousness that he still condemns himself for, along with a layer of frustration and contempt that he has for his father in feeding him shame for his mother's heritage, and BJ's natural, innocent feelings with someone his age that go against his father's racist and hateful beliefs. Blazkowicz is becoming more of a human being to the player, more of someone that has burdens to bear and someone that has a reason to fight past a fiery hate for Nazis, becoming more of a fleshed out and fully realized character. I think how blunt and honest these scenes are shown is important as well. Shying away from the physical, emotional, and verbal abuse that Rip gave to his family would detract from how we're meant to feel towards him in Blazkowicz's shoes. We're meant to get into this hatred and disgust towards Rip that BJ will show later in the narrative, and I think not pulling any punches was important to helping the player reach that point. Before we start moving along with the actual gameplay and the pace of the story picks up, there is one final flashback shown to the player in this opening that would have detracted from the momentum of talking about BJ's childhood. Blasco has a memory of sacrificing one of his squad members, choosing to save Fergus or Wyatt, emulating the choice that we had to make in the New Order and cementing a timeline for us again. I didn't want to bring this up in the middle of all the other memories because I do think that it softens the impact of them by distracting the player a bit, so I am calling that out here, but I didn't want it to ruin the flow of events in my retelling. I think it would have been very easy to not show either of these characters until the very end of the childhood sequence to make sure everything flows a lot nicer, but I do understand that they needed to simulate this decision somewhere to give you a specific timeline since that is a loose end from the New Order. I'm also going to say it up front here, I won't be talking about Wyatt's timeline whatsoever, but I also won't really be talking about Fergus either. Both characters take a backseat to the narrative for the entire runtime, and this decision between timelines becomes an even more pointless diversion for the sake of an emotional decision in the first game. If I talk about Fergus, just assume that Wyatt could be in his place and doing much of the same that Fergus fails to bring to the scene. So, continuing with Blasco waking up from his nap, we find Ava's hammer under attack. Blazkowicz gets into a wheelchair and rolls through the lower levels of the ship in search of Anya, killing anyone that gets in his way until we find Set Roth, our old friend, a Jewish scientist part of a secret technological society called the Yeshud. Roth tells Blasco to keep an eye out for some microwave emitter traps that he's rigged throughout the halls, which we can then employ ourselves to pop some Nazis, and eventually we reach an elevator to the deck. Though we do get ambushed, but Anya saves Blasco before he's shot. The two have a sweet reunion and embrace until Roth catches up to keep us moving along. Coming up to the deck, we see Fergus and Caroline fighting soldiers until they're overpowered, with Frau Engel, the secondary antagonist from the New Order, coming to knock them unconscious and order their capture. Engel takes over as the primary antagonist for this entry, and I really love her as a villain. She's deplorable, hateful, disgusting, just a perfect embodiment of evil, which we'll come to see as we go through the narrative. Right now though, Engel calls out to Blazkowicz asking for his surrender for an opportunity to free his friends and end the raid. Anya begs Blasco not to go, but he and Roth see boarding her airship as the only chance chance that they have to free them from the tether she has holding the hammer. While the circle discusses their plan, we see Engel directing her daughter, Sigrun, to take over the prisoner escort, though Engel stops Sigrun before she can leave to reprimand her for failing to follow the exercise and diet plan she's been assigned. Sigrun apologizes and admits that she did have a small slice of cake the night before, but Engel interrupts her to belittle her, calling her stupid and a disgrace to her bloodline and race. Engel thinks out loud about what the Germans would think if she had a daughter that was sent away to a weight loss facility, then sending Sigrun off with the prisoners before Engel gets upset enough to hit her. I really enjoy seeing this dynamic early on here because, like I mentioned before, we're seeing a parallel to Blazkowicz and his upbringing here in Sigrun and her relationship with Engel. We will see a bit more of these two in just a second, but I enjoy that the narrative is taking a bold step in showing that even the bad guys have some familial trauma. But again, we'll see more in a second. Blazkowicz rolls his way down onto the deck and presents himself for the trade, while the soldiers capturing him mock his appearance and drag him from the chair. We're brought directly into a room with Engel where she's holding Fergus and Caroline, directing a super soldier to strip Caroline of her power armor, an exoskeleton that allows her to perform superhuman feats despite her being paralyzed from the waist down. Caroline is thrown to the ground to face Blazkowicz, and she tells him that she thinks the raid is her fault, that she must have fucked up somehow and brought Engel to them. Then she's knocked unconscious so Engel can have a one-on-one with Blazkowicz. Engel lifts Blazko's head to speak with him, laughing at the state that he's in and the fall from grace that the face of the resistance has taken, then saying that she wants to put BJ on television as a mockery against the resistance. Once she's had her fun, Engel moves her attention to Caroline, taking an axe in hand and asking the super soldier to hold her by her shirt collar. Engel orders Caroline to bow her head, which she replies with saying the resistance would never bow as one last act of defiance. Engel raises the axe, but Sigrun interrupts, telling Engel that she said the prisoners would be freed if Blazkowicz turned himself in. Engel laughs and says that she is setting her free, she's freeing her head from her body. Sigrun doubles down, saying that's not what Engel told the circle, but Engel immediately mocks her with saying that Sigrun told her that she would exercise and stop eating sugar, adding that she's read Sigrun's diary and seen what she's been writing about herself, the Nazis, and her thoughts against the regime. Engel hands Sigrun the axe, telling her that if she wants the prisoners freed, then she'll have to do it herself, with Sigrun still shocked at the revelation that Engel invaded her personal space to read her deepest thoughts. Engel threatens her that bad things will happen to her if she doesn't obey the order, and Sigrun reluctantly readies the axe to execute Caroline. The entire room of soldiers cheer on as Sigrun falls to her knees and cries that she can't do it, with Engel applying more pressure by bringing up what she has managed to do, writing perverted and treasonous thoughts in her diary while filling her body with sweets and sugar. Engel threatens to report Sigrun for treason, and Sigrun crawls away from her mother while she refocuses her attention to Caroline. As Engel tries to belittle the resistance, Caroline tells Blazko to never give up and never give in, until Engel takes her head off with a punctual swing. The room erupts in laughter, and Engel picks up Caroline's severed head, holding it up to BJ and defiling her corpse, forcing the head onto Blazkowicz to kiss him until Sigrun interrupts by saying what she's doing isn't very funny. Engel takes Caroline's head over to Sigrun, asking if she wants some kisses too, just like she wrote in her diary, shoving the head into her face and around her pelvis until Sigrun retches and shoves Engel away. Engel has finally been pushed far enough to smack Sigrun and tells her not to force her to make a decision between faith and family, adding that it would be a losing battle for Sigrun. As the super soldier in the room smashes Caroline's head into viscera, Engel moves on to Fergus, preparing his execution. As the axe falls, Sigrun pushes Engel out of the way, which brings the axe down through Fergus's shoulder, cleaving his arm off. Sigrun tosses Fergus her pistol and he quickly takes out the soldiers in the room, though getting grabbed by the super soldier but being able to slide Caroline's power armor towards Blazkowicz. Blazko suits up while Sigrun holds down Engel until she directs the robo-soldier to escort her out of the room. Sigrun stays behind to let out some frustration about her mother's betrayal of her privacy, while Fergus takes Sigrun at gunpoint, asking for any reason not to blow her Nazi brains out on the floor. Sigrun says that she can provide valuable intel and is willing to defect from the party for the price of her life, along with knowing how to untether the hammer and get the rest of us off of the airship. Which, yeah, sounds good enough, sending Blazko to follow Sigrun's directions on untethering the ship. This sequence with Engel is brutal, but I really do believe that it needed to be. The parallel with Blazkowicz and his father is being shown and established for us through Engel and Sigrun, which I really like. It's showing us that even the bad guys can be pushed far enough to defect from their beliefs and rise above the evil that's being instilled in them, even if that push does come from reading some treasonous AO3 fanfiction. Engel being an awful mother and seemingly hating her daughter is an interesting way to warm the player towards Sigrun and push us deeper into a disdain for Engel, but I do think it's an effective one against what we just experienced with Blasco and his childhood. On top of that, Engel's depravity extends from what we saw in the New Order with Caroline's execution here. Her playing with a severed head and pushing it onto BJ and her own daughter just for a laugh makes Engel more of a cruel and disgusting character, adding fuel to the player's desire to take her down and to see her as even less of a redeemable character to make sure that the player wants to kill her when the time comes. Throughout the airship and through the first few hours of the game, Blazkowicz will often speak to himself as if he were speaking to Caroline, such as asking her to watch over their people while he's away, or seeing his use of her armor as borrowing her wings so that he may fly for the circle in her place. He'll also confide in her in how he's feeling about himself, seeing the armor as a crutch for him to keep fighting as a dead man walking, worried about taking it off and falling apart, or worried about leaving Anya to raise their children alone if he can't survive without the exoskeleton. I love this characterization for Blazkowicz. That hardened shell is being chipped away in many ways for the player, first in seeing his upbringing and now in the present day with his feelings against his failing body. Blasco sees himself as a burden now, and without the power armor, even seeing himself as completely useless or already dead, and I think that's an interesting perspective to bring for an action game protagonist. Blazkowicz sees himself as a failure with his dying body, but the people around him will consistently try to elevate him from that, trying to help him see his usefulness still, or trying to assure him that he still has a life worth living, even if he can't be the Nazi killing machine that he thinks he has to be. It's a great deepening of the tragedy surrounding Blazkowicz, and I appreciate how honest Blasco gets with his feelings about himself in his monologues, or the conversations that he has with Caroline to then juxtapose those feelings with the actions that he does, and how everyone else seems to view him. So we fight through Engel's airship and eventually find the controls for the magnetic tethers on our boat, destroying the console and releasing our people. We double back to Fergus and Sigrun, who have prepped some escape pods, and Blasco collects Caroline's body to give her a better send-off. We plunge down to the hammer and reassess what we can do with a void in leadership, with Fergus and Anya saying that Caroline was just filling them in on her plans to liberate the United States to begin a push for resistance across the entire world. As Fergus gets a prosthetic arm fitted to his body, he tells us that Caroline had made contact with a resistance cell operating out of New York City, with Fergus assuming that Caroline's plan was to make contact with any resistance groups to try and come together as a larger force against the regime. The debriefing is interrupted by our ship nearly getting hit with depth charges from Engel's ship, and Sigrun fills us in that there's a signal being transmitted from inside the ship to give away our position. The gang comes to the conclusion that there has to be a hidden section on the boat that was missed while they've been occupying it, with Roth confirming the existence of Section F, an area on the blueprints that was previously deemed inaccurate that we're now going to try and get to the bottom of. We head into Section F, and sure enough, we've had some Nazi stowaways hiding in the hull of the ship. Blasco takes them out with ease and destroys their communication devices to get us back off the radar from Engel. Coming back to the bridge of the ship, the circle gathers in a service for Caroline, launching her out to sea in a decommissioned torpedo. After the service, we see Anya and Blasco together, with her asking him to check in on Roth about his condition, as BJ says to himself that he and Roth know that his time is limited, and that any assessment from Roth won't give Anya any comfort. Meeting with Roth, we're ambushed by Shoshana, Roth's pet cat that has had her head transfixed onto the body of a squirrel monkey. Blasco is initially hostile towards her, but Roth explains that it's his greatest scientific achievement, having put the head of one creature onto the body of another to extend her life. Roth gives us a quick look over and sends us back to Anya, who was looking for us to help out with the first step of contacting the Resistance members in New York. The team gets debriefed on the plan, with the Resistance cell operating out of the top of the State Building in Manhattan. Anya couldn't track down any means of contact that Caroline had, so our best bet is to infiltrate the building from the ground level and make contact in person. Though with the atomic bomb that was dropped on the city 12 years ago, the radiation in the area means that only Blazkowicz in the power armor would be able to get anywhere near the city. We get dropped off in the harbor and begin our push deeper into Manhattan. We fight our way through the New York City ruins, which is a very cool setting for the level, very visually distinct compared against the New Order's clean and new Nazi architecture, and eventually we reach the building. Getting to the top, we're greeted with guns in our face and expected to explain ourselves. Despite the cold reception, once our hosts realize who Blazkowicz is, they're more than happy to talk, introducing us to Sister Grace, the leader of the group here, and her husband Super Spesh. Yes, that is what they call him. Blasco notices a severe burn on Grace's arm and asks her about what it was like in New York when the bombs hit, with her describing a story of a mother and son looking for each other's comfort despite the skin of their bodies melting off or otherwise being obliterated in the explosion. Grace gets lost in her thoughts thoughts and anger building up, letting a cigarette burn down onto her fingers until BJ snaps her out of it. The two have a quick back and forth about Caroline until Spesh comes out of the room to warn them that Nazis have tracked them down to their hideout. Grace gathers their people to the roof for an evacuation back to the Hammer, while BJ holds off the Nazis coming up the building, with everyone leaving in a couple of our helicopters once we're all squared away. On the ride back, Blasco and Grace get to speak again, with BJ wanting to get her confirmation on helping the Circle build up a new resistance force across America. Grace sees building up that new force as a lost cause, seeing that white Americans have given up and taken to their new leadership too easily, with extremist groups having taken over leadership across the entire country. Blasco says fuck the ones that have given up, their focus should be the people that still have a fighting spirit, that their cause should be to show people that they can still resist Nazi oppression, with Grace coming around and believing in working with the Circle to form a new resistance, even coming up with a fresh plan to start making waves across the country, starting in Roswell, New Mexico. Back on the Hammer, Grace fills us in that her plan is to blow up a Nazi facility that houses a lot of the regime's top brass, the Oberkommando, a secret base built out of an old Dati-Schuld anti-gravity research facility that has recently been reclaimed. Grace wants us to bring a portable nuclear bomb into the facility and blow it up from the inside, with our access point being an old train tunnel that Spesh and his father dug into when looking into alien conspiracies in the area. Blasco suits up and heads out to Roswell undercover to meet with Spesh, but before we get into that, I do want to talk about Grace a bit, as she's the largest figure being introduced in the narrative. I do like Grace, but she kinda rubs me the wrong way, and it feels like that's both intentional and not in the writing. As her and Spesh board the Hammer, they immediately claim Caroline's room without any pushback and remark on it just lying empty, likely a sore spot for members of the Circle, but with that, Grace is also kind of immediately pushed into being the new leader of the American resistance, as opposed to Fergus or Anya, more established members that might be more familiar with how things operate out of the Hammer. I get why Fergus wouldn't step up because it'd make a whole thing with the diverging timelines and Wyatt, but Anya should have been a good candidate for taking charge in the Circle. She was the radio operator for the majority of the New Order, so I feel like it makes sense for her to step into a more logistics-based leadership position that Caroline held. Instead, Grace just appears and begins bossing everyone around, being pretty blunt and rude while doing it, getting into shouting matches with Fergus, or excluding and humiliating Sigrun during debriefings. I understand that there's a vacancy in leadership for the Kreisau Circle and now the new American Resistance, but I really think Grace could have been made a bit more likable initially because her first impressions aren't great, though she does grow on me as a character throughout the story. Not to say that she can't be a firm and outspoken woman in power, I really just think they went a little too far in making her take a stance against characters that we already know and like. Moving along with our mission, Blasco dresses up as a firefighter to make his way into Roswell, hiding the nuke in plain sight as a fire extinguisher. We walk through Main Street of the city during a Nazi parade, complete with Ku Klux Klan members getting German speaking lessons, and eventually find our way to the meeting place, a diner that Spesh is using as a front for our hidden entrance in the basement. It goes well enough, other than a Nazi officer getting a little too interested in Blasco's cover story, then realizing he's the most wanted man in America, but we quickly shut him up and move into Spesh's hideout. And since we've got some one-on-one time with him, I don't really have much to say for Spesh. He's one more new face for us, but he gets much less screen time than Sigrun or Grace, and he's a very one-note kind of character. He's a conspiracy theorist that believes in aliens. He's quirky, he's always talking about lizard people and flesh masks. He's just a very predictable and boring character to me. I feel like he was born out of the development team deciding to send Blasco to Roswell and thinking, oh yeah, that's the alien place. What characters do we have that would believe in aliens? And then slowly realizing that they don't have any part of the cast to fit that role naturally, so now we have Super Spesh. I don't have anything against him, he's comic relief for the audience, I just think he's kind of boring. An important part of this time with Spesh though is that he has a piece of evidence that he believes is alien tech, though Blaskovitz quickly identifies it as Dati-Schuld machinery. Spesh really doesn't like that theory and gets pretty upset at the denial of aliens, so BJ gets to the point and wants to move into the Oberkommando. Spesh shows us the way into the old tunnels he dug, and we infiltrate the base, plant the bomb, and begin the detonation sequence. Unfortunately, a lot of the upper members of the regime get to escape, thanks again to those anti-gravity aircrafts, so a good number of Nazis make their way to the planet Venus, where the Nazis have recently built their latest and greatest research facility. That's right, if you thought going to the moon was a stretch last time, just you wait. Leaving the facility, Blasco grabs a mono wheel and drives through Texas to meet back up with the Circle in Galveston, though making a quick detour back to Mesquite to see his old family home. Walking through the Blaskovitz ranch, BJ has a couple of memories rushing back to him, starting with a memory of his first time meeting Billy, a young black girl that lives nearby that's playing in the creek outside of their house. BJ is initially hesitant to talk to Billy, reciting back some of the hateful things that his father has taught him about black people, and Billy counters it with what her mother has taught her about certain white people being too hateful, ending it with her desire to just buy gum and soda from the store like she used to be able to. BJ asks her what kind of gum she likes, and they bond over enjoying the same brand and hating a specific flavor, then going down the river together to catch some tadpoles. I really love this scene. It's a poignant moment for Blazkowicz, especially after what we saw in the opening, and I'm glad it's the only scene that we're forced to watch here on the farm. The rest are optional, but we will be going through each of them. Seeing BJ's innocence and interest in being friends with Billy, despite what his father beats into him, is bittersweet. It's great seeing that childhood wonder and their simple thought process that would make each other friends going against what both of their parents have said about each other's races. After this memory, Blazkowicz reveals to us why he's come back to the family home, talking out loud to his mother and telling her that he's found someone that deserves the ring that she wanted to give him, wanting to reclaim it for Anya. Through the farmland, we can find a few more memories of BJ and Billy, including a time where BJ caught a rat inside of a water bucket and tried to show Billy as it drowned, though with her reaction and disgust leading to him learning some sympathy and choosing to save the rat instead. Another memory comes up beneath a poplar tree in the front yard. While the two kids were watching clouds, Billy leans over to tell BJ that she has a crush on him, and in the present day, Blazkowicz moves some brush to reveal that the two carved their initials into the tree together in a heart, as he laments Billy's memory and wonders if she's still alive today. I think these scenes are great. Again, it's a lot of mixed feelings about what these memories mean for Blazkowicz and what we know about his upbringing, but as a whole, I think it's a powerful moment for the audience to show that despite his father, BJ was able to be a good kid and just wanted to have a normal childhood. Blazkowicz enters the house and makes his way up to the master bedroom, finding the ring inside of a hidden compartment of his mother's jewelry box and then realizing that he's not in the room alone. Rip is revealed to be waiting for Blazko in the corner, telling him he's abandoned the house for a 2,000-acre ranch that he now owns. Rip says that he heard Blazkowicz was in the area and figured that he'd be making his way back here, telling him that if he's after money or somewhere to hide, going to Rip was the wrong call. Blazko says that he wouldn't be coming to Rip for anything, adding that,
I think of my father, I see a fuck you and a fist flying in my face.
Rip asks if BJ ever did anything for him, seeing BJ as an ungrateful, disobedient, and stupid child. He adds that raising BJ was a waste of time, like banging his head against the wall, and that like BJ, everyone else was wrong and against him. And now, with Nazi control, things have been made right and made better as long as you can play by their rules. Rip continues to lay into BJ, but Blazko takes it in stride, eventually asking about his mother, to which Rip says that she's gone and was taken. BJ makes sure that he clarifies that he sold her out, which Rip doesn't deny, seeing her as just another burden on his life who raised a murderer and a terrorist. Rip decides that the conversation is through and tells BJ to get on his knees so he can execute him, which BJ rejects and...
Was a time I was scared of you. Was a time I'd have pissed myself, had a gun pointed at my head. You know what I feel right now? Not a goddamn thing.
Blazkowicz brutally defends himself against his father, who reveals that he had a phone at his side to let the Nazis know when BJ arrived and that they overheard the entire conversation, with Engel swooping in on her airship and grabbing the entire farmhouse with mechanical claws. This confrontation with Rip is powerful. I think it's a great moment to show just how deep Blazkowicz's father is in this delusion and how someone with Rip's beliefs would operate and benefit in this new world, along with revealing how Rip feels about BJ both now and as a child. Blazkowicz standing unafraid of Rip, talking to him bluntly and ignoring all of his comments, is a stark contrast to the last time we saw Rip talking to Blazko, as a child hiding in the closet. It's one of my favorite moments in a modern game, and I really do think it's one of the most impactful scenes I've seen in a video game, full stop. It's acted wonderfully by both sides. Again, it doesn't shy away from the verbal abuse and emotional manipulation, and it cements itself as an important, final stake in Blazko's growth and recovery from his abusive childhood. Engel tears the house apart in an effort to catch Blazko, lifting it hundreds of feet in the air while we try to release the grip that the ship has. As we break off the final claw, the house begins to fall and a support beam lands on Blazko's head, knocking him unconscious. As BJ wakes up, Nazi soldiers are stripping him of his clothes and the power armor while putting him in handcuffs. One of the soldiers finds the ring that we came to the house for and presents it to Engel, who puts the ring on in a mockery and pretends to be Blazkowicz's lover, acting like a young girl excited about the proposal. She orders the soldiers to knock him out, and we cut into Engel's plan for Blazko, showing him captured in a press release for international television. The crowd cheers at his capture, a woman from the crowd runs on stage to smack BJ to mourn her son's death, and Engel slowly puts a cover back on Blazko's head to move him back to confinement. The next time we're with Blazkowicz, he's been in prison for a few days, but today, Super Spesh has come to speak to BJ as his lawyer for his defense in an upcoming trial. Spesh admits that the trial is just a charade to further humiliate Blazkowicz leading up to his public execution, so today they're planning a breakout, with Spesh laying out the plan to pretend that Blazko has started going crazy and started beating Spesh to get a guard to come in and intervene. Unfortunately for Spesh, the Nazis have gone all in on this whole super surveillance state thing, so naturally, they listen to the entire plan, and when Spesh tries to kick it off, Engel herself comes into the room and puts a bullet through his head. The soldiers stand around to laugh at Spesh's performance, and Engel moves over to Blazko, telling him that Spesh was dead the second he set foot in the building. As Engel approaches, she sings a song for newlyweds and forces her pistol into Blazkowicz's mouth, rummaging it through his teeth and asking if he likes the taste of the gunpowder that fired the bullet that killed his friend. The intimate moment is cut short with a scream deeper in the building as Engel tells Blazko that they must have caught the rest of our friends that were waiting to evacuate BJ and Spesh. Blazkowicz's face is covered again, and we move forward a few weeks into his televised trial. The judge goes through BJ's rap sheet. Naturally, it doesn't look very good for us, and he's sentenced to an execution. As one of the guards begins to ready Blazkowicz's face covering again, BJ breaks free from his bindings, fighting through the courthouse and killing everyone inside. More and more soldiers pour in, Engel's airship looms overhead, but Blazkowicz continues to fight towards an exit. Eventually, the assault has a lull, and we make our way towards a door, opening it to find that Sofia is waiting for Blazkowicz to comfort him. The two embrace, and Blazkowicz laments leaving his mother with Rip, and she says that while it hurt her, she knew that BJ had to move on to find himself in the world. Sofia tells BJ that she's at peace now, but his greatest trials are still to come, and he tells her that he doesn't know if he has the strength to keep on going. BJ tells his mother that he just wants to get home to see his twins and that he wishes that she could see them too, and Sofia tells him that he does have the will to keep going so that they can be reunited after this final hardship, with the scene being cut short as a judge bangs his gavel to finalize Blazkowicz's sentence, revealing that the escape was just a daydream. These last few scenes are fantastic. I love the deepening perversion that Engel has with Blazkowicz, again just pushing the envelope further on his and the player's disgust with her, building up that contempt to make sure that when the time comes, we'll be happy to pull the trigger. Engel rises above Death's Head in the New Order in every way. While he was equally disturbed and forced the player into awful situations, Engel is a constant. Whenever she's on screen, she's here to upset the player and torment Blazkowicz, and I think that's a great way to build up her character and elevates her as one of my favorite antagonists in a game. I really enjoy the final scene with Sofia as well. Even though it is just a dream, it's again that final step that Blazkowicz needs to heal and grow from his familial trauma, wanting the forgiveness of his mother for leaving her with Rip. Obviously, since it is a dream, it's not really Sofia forgiving him, but it is Blazkowicz filling in her place, not condemning himself anymore and forgiving what he's had to do to his mother. It's a good moment for his growth. Now he's dealt with the hate he had for his father, he can heal from the pain he felt for his mother. With the daydream over, Blazkowicz is forced back into reality to the courtroom, being sentenced to death and getting taken away for his execution. As the face covering is stripped away one last time, we're greeted with a massive crowd in the National Mall, now draped with Nazi flags and corrupted with their architecture as the crowd cheers on for Blazkowicz's death. BJ is lowered for his beheading, and Engel wraps up her half-truths about how easy it was to capture Blazko. Engel whispers to Blazkowicz again to mock his desire for love with Anya, and she brings her saber down to his neck with multiple heavy swings, removing his head from his body. Blazkowicz's head thumps to the ground, and Engel raises it up for the crowd and cameras to see, showing off her accomplishment at destroying the face of the resistance and then dropping his head into an incinerator below. Suddenly, the footage of the execution rewinds, right to the point where Engel drops Blazko's head and we're shown another perspective, the Circle getting ready to retrieve his head with a drone flying through a vent in the incinerator. The drone catches the head and drops a look-alike, rushing back through the vent and meeting up with the Circle, taking Blazko's head and trying to stabilize it with oxygen and a blood transfusion. It seems like it isn't working for a second, but Blazko is resuscitated, then placed in a jar with preserving fluids to keep his head on ice for a little while longer. We see a few flashes of the Circle figuring out how to proceed with Blazko's head in a jar, with Roth revealing that Caroline had just found a laboratory with biologically engineered super soldiers, with the plan now being to transfix BJ's head onto one of these bodies through a similar method that Roth had accomplished with Shoshana and the squirrel monkey. I love all of this too. Fergus puts it best in saying that Blazko's the only person on the planet that's hard enough to survive getting his head chopped off. And I agree, Blazkowicz's sheer will to survive probably could have brought him back from that, but I like that we have a creative solution from the circle instead. I also love that this is foreshadowed with Shoshana earlier in the game, and I think it's really cute that she comes to look at Blazko's head as a little wink that he and the cat are now birds of a feather in being a weird you should experiment. I think it's a really fun exercise in building up Blazkowicz as a character too. It's a bold choice to kill your main character, it's an even bolder one to bring them back immediately and swipe away at those stakes, but somehow I think the new Colossus pulls it off with creating this death-defying, legendary status for BJ for the rest of the game, making him an even more powerful force and face for the Resistance. Blazkowicz gets his new body, along with a new outfit that I absolutely love, and we get to see everyone excited that Blazkowicz is back in action. Reporting to Grace, we find her going through some of Spesh's stuff, including the You Should artifact that he showed us back in Roswell, which, when handing it over to Roth, he takes an immediate interest in the piece of tech and gets absorbed in figuring out what it was. Grace fills us in on the next step for us, which will be heading into New Orleans to make contact with another freedom fighter group led by a man named Horton, fighting inside a ghetto in the city as one of the last battlefields of resistance. Grace says that after BJ's execution, the Nazis have turned up the pressure and are now rolling out death squads in place of trying to force people into submission, now just killing anyone left in cities that are deemed undesirable. Grace reminds us that the world over thinks that we're dead, so this is a perfect opportunity to strike fear into the regime and show the public that the good fight isn't over. Our plan is to reach Horton, convince him and his people to join our numbers, then get out of the city to reconvene and plot the next steps together. Checking back in with Roth before the mission, he's become completely obsessed with trying to figure out what the artifact Spesh had was. He tells Blazkowicz that he recognizes it as something that was called the God Key, but does not know what its purpose or use was, and continues with any other research or development to continue to study the key. The team preps for New Orleans, filling us in that Horton has connections to the resistance cells all over the south, with our plan being to inject Blazkowicz behind enemy lines to sneak through the battlefield right under the Nazi forces. We fight through destroyed streets, back alleys, and sewer systems until reaching the American Bank building in the center of the city where Horton and his crew are holding the line. Horton graciously accepts Blazko into the building, recognizing him as Terror Billy, and the two head inside to meet the team. I don't have much to add for Horton or anyone in his group. They're passionate about Nazi killing, just like every other friend we've made along the way, but they don't get much screen time after this meeting. Only two of his members are given names here, Paris Jack, a clarinet player, and the Professor, a crackshot that watches over the front line. Horton himself is fun, he's taken on a preacher man persona to rile up his team, and he plays this role well, but again, this is about all we see of them, as we're reaching the end of the game here and there isn't much room for development left for anyone. Which is a shame, the entire game suffers from a weaker supporting cast, just like the New Order. There are some standouts in Anya, Roth, and now Grace, but even they take a backseat to the main show with Blazkowicz. They all remain stagnant in who they were when we meet them, an independent, supportive, and courageous partner, a brilliant but slightly off-kilter scientist, and a rough-around-the-edges, headstrong leader. I do think there's a bit more of an effort to see these characters as more established, existing people in the world and extended conversations with some of them, but they're few and far between, so it makes it difficult to see any growth or change in these characters, or even any more depth past your first impressions. I like that the focus is on Blazkowicz again because what's being added to his character is top-notch stuff. I've been glazing it the whole time, but I would really love to see more of an ensemble approach because that's definitely what the writing wants you to think of our cast of freedom fighters, but it falls short in providing that satisfaction of a group of strong characters, instead giving us one really strong protagonist. Anyways, upon meeting Horton, his group, like Grace's, are hesitant to join the fight because they believe that their tanks are running on empty. They've been fighting this whole time to no effect, and they've become complacent in their small skirmishes. Blazkowicz again has to rally the people, this time appealing to their sense of duty, telling them that they need to fight back and stand up for what they believe in. Seeing Horton's group of spirited fighters that came to the party too late that can make up for lost time by doubling down with the American Revolution at a national level. Blazko's harsh words ring true for Horton's group and they come around, though they'll need a distraction to try and meet our group at the Hammer in the harbor, lending us a reprogrammed Panzerhund that we ride through the streets of New Orleans, setting fire to any Nazis in front of us. We cause a good distraction, but the Hammer's gotten stuck in the low tide and beached, so naturally, our only way out is bombing the remnants of the Nazis in the city and riding a nuclear shockwave out to sea. Yeah, alright, no argument from me, we're playing by the rule of cool tonight. Now that we're successfully blasted back to sea, we've got to figure out what our next steps are going to be with our growing number. Horton tells us that we've got no chance of creating an actual resistance force with Engel's airship active, telling us that over the last few years, the airship has been able to stomp out any opposition thanks to its mobility and sheer force of power. So our next step should be taking over the ship to help any resistance cells breathe a little easier. The only issue with that plan is there's an automated defense system on the ship, the Odin system, which runs off encrypted protocols that only the Oberkommando would know, who we, unfortunately, just ran all the way off to Venus, if you remember the last time that they were mentioned. Conveniently for us, there happens to be auditions running for an upcoming propaganda film about the death of William Blazkowicz, so our plan is to impersonate a Hollywood actor and audition for the role ourselves, with the film crew operating out of Venus for the utmost security and secrecy. We take on the persona of Jules Redfield, a meathead actor that Blasco looks enough alike, and sneak our way into the auditions, taking his personal invitation and escort to the planet and beginning Blasco's acting career. Getting to the set, we're greeted by a few other actors and we each prepare for the line read. Blasco tries to write down the lines on his hand but is interrupted by Adolf Hitler entering the room to watch over the audition. I really enjoy the new Colossus's portrayal of Hitler. I don't think there's any other way they could have presented him other than what they have here. Hitler here is a paranoid, pathetic, and weak old man, pissing himself, erratically shooting a Ronald Reagan parody in the face, and cowering into the director's arms while crying for his mother, then lying down to take a quick nap near his piss and vomit on the floor. It's great, it's completely spitting in the face of his memory exactly as it should. But let's see how BJ's audition for the role of William Blazkowicz goes.
I will muffin your right peach too.
Ach, widerlich. Absolut widerlich. Sie haben offensichtlich keine Ahnung, wer dieser Mann ist.
Just kidding. It's a short memory game for 3 lines, and when we pass, Hitler is upset with our weaker performance, so he moves on to the other 2 actors here for the role. The guy next to us nails the line read, but the director wants to make sure that we're entering the right psychology for the role, showing some propaganda against BJ with Hitler claiming to have known him intimately, which is why the regime was able to kill and capture him. Hitler gets a little eepy, taking a nap like I mentioned a moment ago, so we move on to the physical side of the performance, asking each actor to take a jab at a fight scene with a Nazi soldier. The first guy goes up, failing to pull off a proper fight and looking feeble in his attempt, so Hitler shoots him in the back. It's Blasco's turn, and if BJ knows how to do anything, it's roughing up a Nazi, so of course he puts on a great show and brutalizes the soldier for the performance. Blasco kind of breaks character and speaks candidly to the director and Hitler, but he wins them over with this physical performance, to which Hitler shoots the last actor in the head and sends us back to our suite to rest before filming. Now it's time to begin the operation we came here for and track down the Odin codes for the airship. We walk across the surface of Venus, sneak through a couple of facilities, and it's a really cool setting for the level. Honestly, it makes me hopeful that Machine Games tackles something very different from Wolfenstein in the future, because their vision for a hard sci-fi on Venus is really impressive. We print the Odin codes, though they are still encrypted in a Nazi cipher, and we bring them back to the hammer in a stolen flying saucer. I really love how silly these games get sometimes, and they completely know that they're playing it up just for the sake of being absurd. This shot of Blasco entering orbit set to a hard rock song just feels like the development team is winking at the camera. BJ gets back on board to the hammer, but as we enter through the moon pool, an alarm goes off, signaling an attack on board. We enter the helm and find everyone, at least all the named characters, ready to surprise Blazkowicz for his 50th birthday. It's a sweet get-together while Blasco hands off the Odin codes to Grace, for her to then send it to Sigrun with some friction about her Nazi upbringing, and the gang has a nice party while Sigrun is hard at work decrypting the codes. Sorry Sigrun. After the party, everyone is struggling in the morning after, but we're otherwise ready to go on assaulting the airship thanks to Sigrun's hard work through the night. Grace informs the squad that Engel is expected to be parked over Hollywood, making a fluff interview on a late-night talk show, giving us the perfect opportunity to raid the ship without her knowledge. Sigrun fills us in on how we'll be able to bypass the security measures, and Grace again writes her off as a Nazi sympathizer, and this time Sigrun has taken enough of her shit. Sigrun smacks Grace to the ground and begins choking her, lifting her off the ground with one hand and shouting at her to never call her a Nazi again, saying that Grace doesn't have the right to label her as something that she detests so deeply, forcing Grace to agree to never say it again. Grace obliges and seems to have a newfound respect for Sigrun, telling her that she'll be joining the team on the final part of their plan tonight and letting her give the debrief for the mission. Anya and Blasco infiltrate the airship for Anya to disable the Odin system while Blasco takes out any opposition. Don't know why we're sending the super pregnant woman into the field, but alright. We fight through the airship, disabling the onboard defenses, and this time fighting backwards through its layout against the last time that we were here, which is fine, but you can't fool me that we're not just reusing this space. And eventually we reach the main Odin control terminal. Outside the doors, Blasco gets ambushed, but thankfully our mega pregnant wife arrives just in time to save the day in a massive bloody explosion while she fires 2 assault rifles, shirtless and covered in blood.
Wow.
Yeah, they're going a little hard with hamming it up here, but I think it's fun. It's a good way to show that Anya is just as willing to throw her life on the line for BJ as he is for her, so fuck it, go a little crazy at the end here. I don't feel the need to condemn this scene like other people seem to, because this entire franchise, including the reboot games, thrive on going batshit insane for the sake of fun action. The Resistance meets up at the central terminal and punches in the code to disable Odin, taking the ship over for themselves and heading down to the ground to meet Engel during her interview. Sigrun stays back, but everyone else heads into the studio with us to hold things down while we get up close and personal with Engel one last time. As Blazko creeps closer to the stage, the host and Engel play up the performative interview for the broadcast, complete with audience cutouts, an applause track, and leading questions for Engel to pretend that she's a hero for the people until Blazkowicz finally closes in. Blazko wants to settle this on air just like she tried with him, disarming her with his axe and burying the hatchet into her head, telling her that she's out of her league trying to fight the Resistance if this is the best she can do against them, then splitting her skull open for the cameras. The rest of the Resistance comes onto the set and begins the last leg of the mission, speaking to the masses and rallying them behind our cause. Horton and Grace take turns speaking to the camera, telling the people that the Nazis have been lying, torturing, and beating people into submission, telling the American people to wake up from their control, to speak freely and think for yourselves. They say that in any way that you can resist, if you want to fight, if you just want to think of a better America for your children, then you are a part of the revolution and you are on the right side of this fight, closing off their message with a call for an insurrection to begin tonight, and the credits begin. The finale for the new Colossus is fantastic. This final scene with Engel completely tearing her down while she's unable to talk back and try to say anything in her defense, or even just some final words of vitriol, is great. Like I've mentioned, she's been built up to be this figure for the player and Blazkowicz to despise, and I think taking her out without much fanfare is the perfect way to send her off, because at this point, she's just a problem to be dealt with, in part thanks to her creating Blazko into a more powerful idol for the Resistance. She's no longer a figurehead to be fought in a boss battle like Death said, and I enjoy the final messages from Horton, Grace, Blazkowicz, and the team. It's a powerful send-off for the message of the game, trying to unify the American people against oppression and fighting for the freedoms that they once believed in. It feels like a nice bookend for this chapter. Blazko and company have accomplished their mission, and the next steps are up to the rest of the country, which we do see take place in stills throughout the credit sequence. It's a much more hopeful and happy ending compared to the New Order. Our team got to do what they set out for, and now things will turn around for the better. At least that's how it seems initially. Oh, and during the credits, Blazkowicz comes back to Engel's body and takes the ring from her hand, finally getting to propose to Anya in a sweet moment to tie up the relationship in this entry, which is really sweet to see. Which finally concludes the story of Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. I really love this entry in the reboot series. It has more of a personality, more heart, and more fun with the stakes at hand, while still delivering a powerful message in Blazkowicz's growth against his childhood trauma and our mission throughout the game of rallying the American people against a tyrannical regime. I do have some problems with the story at large. Again, just like the New Order, this entry fails to have an interesting supporting cast of characters, though does make up for that in Blazko's development front and center. One thing in particular that I take issue with is the loss of BJ's internal struggle with his failing body and potentially having to leave Anya to raise their children alone, which you might have noticed I stopped mentioning because the game forgets about it entirely, and I wanted to convey a similar feeling in my retelling. The opening hours of the game are filled with this underlying sadness that Blazkowicz is dying, and once he stops going, he probably won't be able to start up again, especially if he takes off the power armor. That introspection is immediately lost in Blazko getting his new body, which, yeah, he's probably not thinking about that too much anymore, but as the player, as the audience, it was something that we were being beaten over the head with for a while, so you would expect some closure on that thread. I guess I wish there was something in the sense of Blazkowicz accepting that he has a new chance at life, maybe being more optimistic for the future, or talking to Anya about these thoughts that he once had. I don't know, something at least, but as it stands, it feels like a strong point in the narrative that gets lost and forgotten somewhere in the middle. The continuing development of Blazkowicz as a whole cements him as being one of my favorite game protagonists, with him becoming even more human to the audience, and the player gaining a better understanding of how he became the man that we play as. I think the new Colossus strikes out in a bold direction for the franchise, and mostly hits the targets they were shooting for, although going against another weak supporting cast and some loose ends that could have used a proper trimming.
Should get to work on upgrading my weapons.
The new Colossus extends the foundation that the New Order created in being a fantastic first-person shooter that puts the player on the offensive and tests their speed in combat. I said it in the last video, but I really love playing these games. While they aren't the most innovative shooters on the market, they do provide a solid, heavy, and fun experience throughout their entire runtime, thanks to some fantastic inclusions and decisions in fleshing out Machine Games' vision for the genre. Much like last time, I also want to start with talking about the difficulty seen throughout the new Colossus. There are 6 difficulty options for you to choose from, allowing you to make a granular choice on how you approach the combat throughout the game, letting you coast through and mow down every Nazi in sight, or forcing you to think more strategically and carefully to eke out a win, or somewhere in the middle. I want to express again that I don't think there's any shame to be had in playing on lower difficulty options. By all means, play how you see fit. There was a bit of a discussion around both Wolfenstein entries and their difficulty selection mocking a player for choosing lower difficulties, but you won't get that from me. If it's in the game for you to choose from to tailor your experience to what you want, please do, but I don't think it's fair to shame or change a game into being playable for everyone else if these options aren't available. I do believe that not every game is for everyone, and I think accepting that a game isn't for your taste or your skill level, then yeah, sorry, maybe you'll have to skip that one. Though if the options are included with intent from the development team, please feel free to pick the difficulty level you'd be comfortable with. I've said it a few times now on the channel, but I usually gravitate towards the highest difficulty options present, because as the new Colossus unfortunately puts it, I am a fearless gamer. Can't leave that in. That is so embarrassing. Fuck it. I like the feeling of accomplishment that completing a difficult game brings you. It feels like having something to overcome, and that's a large part of why I enjoy games, having a mission to set out and complete and finishing it through the trials that the game sends your way. That being said, I do think that the highest difficulty in the new Colossus is a bit rough and poorly balanced. I played through the game twice in its entirety, the first time being on I Am Death Incarnate, the highest option available, and I cannot recommend that someone else does the same. Enemies are bullet sponges, the player is as tough as glass, and it ends up feeling like banging your head against the wall during some sequences. The main issue here is the damage dealt to the player, I think. If you are exposed for any longer than a single second, you will die, even at full health and even with armor to reduce the damage taken. I don't think this is very fun. I think a great way to balance high enemy damage output is to make the player equally powerful against their enemies, making combat quick and punctual across the board for an even playing field. The new Colossus unfortunately opts into tankier enemies, more armored enemies, and so on, which leads me to recommend playing on a lower difficulty. Maybe the second highest option is a little better for the full experience if you're seeking a difficult but not infuriating challenge. Speaking of infuriating, if you're somehow more of a masochist than I am, there is a 7th unlockable mode for the main campaign, Mein Leben, available to you once you've completed the game once. This mode is the same level as I Am Death Incarnate, though now with permadeath, meaning your save file will be deleted once you die. I tried it, I got halfway through the first level and decided that was enough for me, and I pray for the poor souls that wanted to get 100% completion for this game. So, much like I said last time, the difficulties available are here for you to tailor your experience, giving you a ride through a Nazi-killing fun time, or asking you to keep pace with quick enemies and quicker bullets, though missing the mark on the highest difficulty for me thanks to some poor balancing decisions. It might sound silly, but I'll say it again, you should pick whatever difficulty you're comfortable with, and don't let the game, or anyone else, make fun of you for what you like to play. With that out of the way, let's get into actually playing the new Colossus. Much like its predecessor, the new Colossus finds a balance between old FPS mechanics and modern conveniences to blend the two in a way to make gameplay feel fresh and different from its contemporaries. Continuing from the new order, we have health pickups and a total health pool, asking you to scavenge the level for items to heal the player, rather than relying on a regenerating pool when not taking damage. We also have armor, a separate resource pool that negates some damage to your health and functions similarly, chipping away with damage and repairing with pickups in the world. I really like this system. It's simple and effective, it's classic and timeless, it just fits the first-person shooter genre really nicely. Another fun continuation in the new Colossus is overhealing, letting the player max out their health pool above the usual limit to grant you extra health, letting you continue your aggressive playstyle or take a little extra cushion if you want to be safe, though ticking down over time to make sure it's not a permanent solution. The health and armor systems are a lot of fun and easy to understand, in part thanks to the new Colossus focusing on an arena-centric design to its levels, rather than being a linear corridor shooter. It feels natural to scavenge around during a fight for that little bit of health to pump your confidence back up, or picking apart enemies for armor to get you ready for the next fight. Meanwhile, the actual moment-to-moment shooting feels fantastic throughout, laying the power fantasy on thick while maintaining tight, responsive, and consistent control. Every gun feels powerful. Each shot feels like a punch through your enemies, and the guns are handled with a sensible and believable heft in their motion, recoil, and firing. Every fight feels frenetic, with your bullets chewing through enemies and theirs spitting back. Everything feels properly intense. One of my favorite additions to the first-person shooter formula that the New Order introduced is what I called omnidirectional leaning. Again, allowing the player to fully control where Blasco positions his body by holding one input key, then pressing another movement key, letting him lean in a full range of motion to peek around, above, or even underneath cover. I love this system, and it's just as engaging to use as the last entry, but I have a big caveat against it this time around. For whatever reason, the new Colossus decided to update how dynamic leaning works when aiming down sights, changing how and when Blasco will automatically lean out of cover if you're aiming a gun near the edge of a surface. Typically, this system is fine. A lot of games have employed this over the last few years, and usually it's a great addition. However, in tandem with the omnidirectional leaning input, they seem to fight each other on which should be prioritized, the player's input or the automatic system, which leads to a song and dance of positioning yourself correctly if you want to manually lean to make sure that you aren't triggering the automatic system. Yeah, you could tell me to just use the dynamic leaning, but I like the level of control you get from using the manual system. I can choose where to fire out of cover, which angle I'd like to shoot from, and mix things up on the fly rather than continuing to peek from one angle. I do get why this was included. It's a way to let the player feel in control without having to engage with the manual inputs if they didn't like how it felt, which is fair. It's a little clunky to hold down a specific key then hold another movement input, but I think working with the system and the input keys to make things feel more natural would have been a better option instead of stepping on the toes of omnidirectional leaning. Other than the finicky spots you can find yourself in, the addition of full control in how you move around cover is great. I love learning how to use it in my favor, and again, I still don't understand how the system for cover has seemingly been left to only these games. Circling back to using your guns, you have a more limited arsenal this time around, though each gun feels more powerful, which I think is a benefit and loss for the player. Every gun performs well in seemingly every situation, with the exception of a shotgun at long range, obviously. So it feels like there's less of a choice for the player to pick a tool for specific scenarios. In the New Order, if an enemy was far away, you had your marksman rifle to deal with them. If there were multiple enemies in your path, you could pull out the assault rifle or shotgun at your discretion. In the new Colossus, it doesn't feel like it matters what gun you're using. Each one will take out an enemy with ease, and nothing excels against anything else in specific use cases. This issue for me is especially apparent with the weapon upgrades throughout the game. Each gun, with the exception of the shotgun, gets an upgrade for armor-penetrating bullets, meaning each gun is capable of tearing through armored enemies just as easily as any other. This makes each gun always capable, always viable, and always effective, which sounds like it could be a good thing, but to me, it drastically takes away from the versatility of your arsenal. And just a quick side note from me, this entirely defeats the purpose of the laser craftwork. In the first game, it was your best, most viable option against armored enemies, but I don't think I pulled it out ever again once I had armor-piercing bullets in every single gun. I like having to swap to specific guns for different scenarios. It made each gun feel powerful and effective in their own way. The pistol was great for stealth, the marksman rifle for range, and the shotgun was unmatched in close quarters. But now, each gun can fill multiple roles, and they all overlap to create equally effective options, lessening my desire to switch from any gun until it runs out of ammo. Another part of weapon identity that I think the new Colossus weakens comes from additional weapon functions. Each gun has a specific upgrade that changes the base functionality of the gun, like the scope for the assault rifle changing the gun into a semi-automatic firing mode, or the rotor cylinder for the shotgun to fire off 3 barrels at a time. Where my issue for these upgrades lies is that I think these additional firing modes are always objective upgrades for the guns, not just optional firing modes for specific scenarios. They're just an improvement that you have to toggle. In the new order, these additional firing modes were again made for specific use cases, like the shrapnel rounds for the shotgun or the suppressor for the pistol. Now, the rotor makes the shotgun spit out more damage, the magnum rounds make the pistol more powerful, the scope makes the assault rifle more accurate and easier to control, and the nail rounds increase the machine pistol's damage at the cost of bullet velocity. Really, it becomes a part of these upgrades mostly becoming just more damage. I think increasing functionality over more damage for these upgrades would make them feel a lot better to me. Again, in the new order, the assault rifle got an underbarrel optional rocket launcher, which changes how you use that gun entirely, opening it up to heavy enemies or bosses. Now I just have a rotor on my shotgun that makes it do 3 times more damage. Why would I ever turn that off? Again, all of the guns feel great to use and properly powerful in a fight with accurate and precise control, heavy animations and feedback, but they all blend together into feeling like a round peg in a square hole. They all do fit, but maybe it would feel better if they didn't. But another positive way that the new Colossus helps the player feel powerful in combat is the inclusion of dual wielding, letting the player combine any 2 guns in each hand to maximize their firepower in trade of accuracy. I do like that you can pick which gun is in each hand. I just never really found a reason to mix and match guns over using 2 of the same gun, but hey, more options for the player is always a plus. Being able to wield 2 guns is a blast. It's a great show of power from Blasco, and it helps the player feel like a strong force in combat. Continuing the power fantasy is the introduction of multiple heavy weapons that can be found in each level. The new order had a single heavy weapon, the MG60 I think, which was a laser-based machine gun that was fun to use, though very limited in being just a big machine gun. The new Colossus brings in 4 new heavy weapons, the diesel gun, laser gun, hammer gun, and uber gun. All 4 being very different approaches to heavy assault weapons, and each being irresistible for me to use in combat. Each gun fires a different ammo type and functions a little differently from each other, with fiery bursts, heavy laser beams, or automatic shotgun fire, and they all feel great to mow down the opposing force or with evening the odds against heavy enemies. I'm really not a big heavy weapon guy in games. I usually prefer the exact opposite approach in small arms weapons and stealth, but I cannot help myself from using these new heavy weapons. They make the player feel unstoppable, even if only for a little bit with their limited ammo pool. But speaking of that opposite approach, we can talk about stealth throughout the game. Stealth is a large part of Wolfenstein's identity to me, being the foundation for the original games and a playstyle that's supported in each entry. The new Colossus is no different, and I believe that it improves upon its predecessor in a lot of ways. Throughout the game, stealth works on basic line of sight and audio detection rules, meaning if you're seen by an enemy or making too much noise around them, you'll be detected and enter active combat. There's a lot of wiggle room for the player though. Both detection methods are very lenient for the player, letting you stomp past enemies if you can get out of their eyeline quickly or even run past them if you hide shortly after, which I do really like. The leniency lets the player engage with stealth more often and more easily, letting you weave it in and out of engagements rather than a hard detection system that makes it an all or nothing on being detected. In stealth, you have 3 ways to deal with your enemies: a silenced pistol, throwing axes, or stealth takedowns when you're in melee range. They're all fine options and each let you mix up your strategy and approach to engagements, but they aren't anything special in making stealth feel unique throughout the game. Throwing axes are again kind of awkward to use like the knives were in the New Order, but I think they felt more consistent this time around. Otherwise, it's a lot of the same as what was seen in the last entry. Where stealth is improved is the overall design of arenas, along with some inclusions for the player to create new routes and sneak around more effectively. Starting with the arena design, it's pretty straightforward. It just feels like there was a more open thought to having stealth be a viable option more often rather than just a means to start a fight that will always end up in a loud back and forth. There's more passageways to sneak through, more walkways to climb to, more thought out routes throughout levels, just all around more inclusive design for stealth gameplay. Where you can create new routes are a new inclusion for the game: contraptions, allowing Blazkowicz to push his body past its physical limits in a couple ways thanks to cybernetic upgrades. I will admit that only 2 of these are for stealth gameplay, but this made for a good transition, so don't overthink it. The contraptions in the game add on to each play style, letting you pick one through the main campaign, then allowing you to find the other 2 in repeat missions. More on that in a bit. Starting with the Constrictor Harness, it allows the player to enter smaller gaps than previously accessible to open up vents, small openings in walls, and more to sneak around enemies more efficiently. We also have the Battle Walker, giving the player pneumatic legs that extend your height to reach new areas above your eyeline, letting you pass over enemies or get a new vantage point in a fight. Lastly, we have the Ramshackles. This is the non-stealth one, which lets you rush through weakened walls, vents, and enemies to push forward in a fight or loudly make your entrance into an arena. I like all 3 of the contraptions. They each complement a playstyle, with the harness helping stealth, the shackles benefiting aggressive and loud play, and the Battle Walker being somewhere in the middle. So I think they're all boons to gameplay, but where they really start to feel powerful is the passive effects that are granted with each. When you get a contraption, you immediately get 2 passive effects alongside their active effects in gameplay, such as the Terror Billy perk with the Constrictor Harness, which slows down time as enemies begin to detect you, or the Adrenaline perk for the Battle Walker, granting you 3 health points each time you kill an enemy. These passive effects are greatly beneficial to gameplay, and are pushed even further with optional upgrades that can be found in the game's mission hub on the hammer, like the stamina upgrade for the Battle Walker, which makes overhealing function as regular health, no longer ticking away over time, now only depleting with damage. All three of the optional passive upgrades for contraptions push their usefulness even further, and honestly, the passive benefits outweigh their active components in gameplay, because while I do enjoy that the arenas and levels throughout the game are designed with each contraption in mind, it never feels like one contraption has an advantage over another, which I think is a shame, similar to my thoughts about the guns. Everything is always useful, and nothing has a chance to shine brighter in any given scenario. Throughout gameplay, you also have a constant sense of progression and growing power in the perk system, which returns from the New Order in being a challenge-based unlock system rather than experience point-based levels. I really enjoy the perk system. It lets you create a playstyle for yourself and upgrading the things that you like to engage with, like getting benefits for your character when you get dual-wielding kills, stealth takedowns, headshots, and so on. The upgrades you earn are a lot more tangible in gameplay too, with ammo and grenade capacity increases, damage dealt while aiming down sights, better health regeneration, and more. A direct improvement from the New Order is that these unlocks are also incremental, leveling up to 5 times for further unlocks throughout the entire game rather than single stagnant increases whenever you first meet the threshold. I really like the perk system, and I'm glad it returned in the new Colossus, but I am a little disappointed that some of the more experimental perks from the old Blood didn't make an appearance, like mashing the reload input to reload guns faster, or the quick 180 turn that snaps your crosshair onto enemies. I think extending those weird perks and abilities would have been a really fun inclusion, maybe adding them onto the contraptions to make sure all of the players' perks have 5 levels to unlock. I don't know, I think the weird perks were interesting, and I'm sad they didn't return in any way. The last part of gameplay that I want to talk about at length is probably going to be the most negative section of this video, which is why I wanted to save it for last, because as a whole, I do love the new Colossus, and I really enjoy playing it, but there is a large part of the game's formula that I have a problem with. The new Colossus introduces the War Map, an interactive visualization of levels to pick specific parts of the campaign to be replayed as sectioned off arenas so the player can find missed collectibles, get the other contraptions, and progress the post-game Uber Commando hunt. More on that in a second. I really dislike this. I don't like that the main campaign gamifies the entire world into specific arenas for you to replay and revisit with the excuse of more content. It really detracts from the believability of the game world and the purpose these locations had in the story, which would be fine in a separate challenge mode or something, and the game even has a separate challenge mode, but it's baked into the core gameplay and cheapens the entire experience for me. This is further extended in that post-game Uber Commando hunt, which is thinly veiled as more story content, though ends up being busy work in empty, meaningless levels. But please hang in there with me while I explain. Throughout the game, you can find commanders, special enemies that will call in reinforcements if the player is detected. When killed, these commanders drop Enigma codes, which act as currency to unlock Enigma puzzles to track down Uber commandos as their locations are hidden until you complete the puzzle. I do like the puzzles, they're quick and painless, and the presentation of vector graphics on an old computer terminal is fun, but I don't enjoy how many Enigma codes it takes to unlock each puzzle. I would guess that every main story level has only 2 or 3 commanders throughout it, meaning you net 2 or 3 Enigma codes per level, with 16 levels at my count, averaging us about 48 Enigma codes for a typical playthrough, give or take a few. To complete the Uber Commando post-game hunt, you need to collect 72 Enigma codes, meaning you'd only be about 2/3 of the way to your end goal once you've completed the main campaign. On top of that, you have to complete each Uber Commando hunt to wrap up the post-game content, so you have to revisit these levels anyway to kill the 16 Uber Commandos and get the 32 missing Enigma codes, though you'll only be getting 1 or 2 codes per level at best, since they're partitioned off sections of the arenas to fit more nicely into the design for this post-game content. This leads to a long, boring dredge through each level of the game over and over to kill Uber Commandos and piece together your Enigma codes, which, to be fair, do get doubled if you're revisiting an area after you've already killed the Uber Commando, but you're still replaying that level, which is where my issue with this system lies. I do not think replaying these levels adds to the enjoyment of the game. In fact, I think it dampens the experience by making the game feel too much like a checklist to compare against, rather than an experience to play through. But circling back to the core experience of playing through the new Colossus, again, I think it's a great game in the experience of playing the main campaign. I do think that the new Colossus succeeds in being a good sequel by improving the core gameplay established by the New Order, but it does miss the mark in a few regards. It does up the feeling of excitement from its predecessor, though taking a few missteps in overcorrecting and overextending utility in gameplay to make things feel too similar, and by not asking the player to employ specific solutions for specific problems, always giving the player multiple solutions that could feel a lot more impactful if they were limited to certain use cases. I have more fun playing the new Colossus, which is undeniably a plus for the game, but I wish I had to think a little more about my decisions in gameplay, which the New Order did expect of the player. Now I can just shoot my way through my problems, which is fun in its own right, but it doesn't feel as satisfying.
3 thrilling tales of action and adventure for all freedom-loving Americans.
The new Colossus received 3 DLC episodes as part of a season pass of post-game content after the base game's release, titling these the Freedom Chronicles, in-world propaganda pieces written to motivate the resistance after kicking off the American Revolution in the main campaign, which I've never actually played, so I was looking forward to checking these out for the first time. Man, I wish I could have tempered my expectations then. Each chronicle features a different main character going through separate events unrelated to each other with brief narratives in each, though they're all completely uneventful and vary greatly in quality and length, so we will be breezing through talking about the DLCs at large. Each character in each chronicle has 3 episodes to play through, and each character has a focus on specific play styles, coinciding with which contraption that they emulate, with Gunslinger Joe being the Ramshackles, Agent Silent Death being able to constrict herself like the Harness, and Captain Wilkins getting a bootleg Battle Walker. Before you start any of them, you do have the option to play Episode 0, which acts as a prologue and a brief taste of what's to come for each character, though each snippet lasts maybe 5 minutes? It definitely isn't worth your time if you're heading in to play the DLC episodes on their own, and this was apparently bundled with the season pass, so you already paid for access to those DLCs in the future. I really think episode 0 should have been free. I can't imagine my disappointment in getting this with a $25 purchase. This makes sense as an incentive to pick up the DLC, but as a bonus for already owning them, I don't know, it seems very misguided. Playing as Joe features a lot of big arenas, a lot of heavy weapons, and is overall just the most engaging of the bunch, since his story has the longest runtime. Joe fights through Chicago, which is definitely the Roswell level in a different layout, as he hunts down the man who captured and killed his father, some weird American dentist that loves Nazis, taking Joe to Venus to finish off the dentist in a big spectacle fight. And I could go through each chronicle with that level of scrutiny, yes, this is sarcasm, but to save my breath and to save you some time, that's exactly the formula for the other 2 characters and their stories. They fight through levels that we've seen in the base game that are ever so slightly different for their specific play styles. Then the final level takes place in a more exotic location, on the moon for Silent Death and an underwater base for Captain Wilkins. These DLC chapters are really underwhelming. I think Silent Death's episodes took me maybe 30 minutes to complete in its entirety, and I was shocked that it was over already. Captain Wilkins' episodes were slightly longer, but only because I got stuck on a specific fight for a while. I really don't even see the value in these being more Wolfenstein gameplay, because the game already includes a challenge mode that you can play for free, and you have the option of the Uber Commando hunt in the base game. So again, these are underwhelming, a complete disappointment, and I'm shocked that these are valued at $10 a piece. Thank God for the Steam sale.
Wow, these graphics sure are realistic.
The new Colossus is a fantastic looking game with a killer soundtrack to match the energetic gameplay constantly on display. Starting with the visual side of things, I really love how this game looks. The new Colossus adopts more of a stylized art style when compared against the melodramatic hyperrealism of its predecessor, and I think it works really well in the punk rock, sci-fi, 1960s alternate history setting. There's a lot of color here with more saturated tones to fill in a room, and I think everything looks great. I do love how the New Order looks. I think it creates a very unique, dreamlike, and kind of surreal look for the game, but a wash of color fits this version of Wolfenstein great too. Pumping up the vibrance of everything makes the world feel more alive for these characters to me, more than the desaturated and ethereal look we saw last time. With that color, the team also seemed to thrive in bringing in strong, harsh light sources to breathe life into environments, creating beautiful vistas, cozier nooks and crannies, or just making the world feel a little less bleak, which I do feel goes in hand with the overall tone of the game being more rebellious and upbeat. Something that continues and is improved upon from the New Order is the use of scale in the world to create vast, detailed environments for every level. There's constantly a more grounded sense of existing in these places. It properly feels like a destroyed block of New York, a march for fascism through the streets of Roswell, or a corrupted depiction of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. They all feel fully realized in a way to trick the player into stepping into these locations, even if only for a brief moment. Continuing with the impressive environments, I love seeing a different kind of design for places as opposed to the last game. In the New Order, BJ is usually infiltrating newer places, new prisons, new laboratories, clean, organized buildings that we bring the chaos to. In the new Colossus, we're often visiting places that have already fallen, like the remains of a city after a nuclear detonation or parts of a town that's seen years of fighting in its streets. And I think showing this contrast in locales is fantastic, while adding to that visual storytelling of the franchise, showing us what the Nazis leave behind in their wake once they've gotten what they need from an area or have used it for their bidding. Lastly, for the environments of the game, I think everything is properly fleshed out and detailed to a believable degree, again making the world feel more real for the player. Ava's Hammer, the mission hub throughout the game, is a great example for this. There's rooms for all of our major characters with items pertaining to their history and growth, mess halls and clubhouses, pantries and livestock, a shooting range, and even more to discover. It really makes you think these characters have settled in here and are trying their best to make it a home. And that level of detail extends to each location we find ourselves in. Laboratories on Venus, the ruins of a police station in New York, a park in downtown New Orleans. There's always an exceptional focus on creating lived-in spaces throughout the game, which I deeply appreciate. Another thing that I really enjoy that's extended from the narrative is the game's excessive use of violence and gore. Violence is typically used throughout the narrative to drive home a point, to show the Nazis' true intent and the depths that they'll reach to hurt people. But in gameplay and in motion, violence is shown for our aggression against the opposition. The new Colossus is brutal, ripping off limbs, cleaving apart bodies, turning people into bloody splatters. It really becomes part of the storytelling in gameplay too, showing us the hatred that fuels Blazkowicz in his actions as the player. One final part of the visual identity for the game that is continued and improved on from the New Order is the cinematic feel of cutscenes throughout the entire game. The new Colossus elevates its cutscenes with fast-paced and tight editing, using interesting angles, quick transitions full of energy, and often setting the rhythm of a scene to a specific song from the soundtrack, bringing these scenes to life and giving them much more personality than presenting them as simple shot-reverse shot dialogue or wide shots for group scenes, always bringing in something interesting visually while you have a break in gameplay. Lastly, for the visuals, I want to talk about the HUD, or heads-up display, and user interface, or UI, throughout the game. To keep it short, I think everything is an objective upgrade from the New Order. The HUD feels more modern, more stylized and sleek to fit in with the progression of the timeline, and a more artistic look for the game overall, giving us blocky, easy-to-read components like your health and armor situated at the bottom of the screen, or ammo indicators at each lower corner for your respective gun in either hand. Ease of use and simplicity is key for a heads-up display to me, and the new Colossus hits the nail on the head in that regard. Something that returns that I'm still upset about is the constant centered dot to represent the player's view and center their focus on the screen, which is replaced with a crosshair for specific weapons to reflect their spread and accuracy. This is entirely a personal gripe. I just really hate crosshairs, and I feel they're a little unnecessary to a trained eye, and appreciate when I can turn them off to clear up some visibility on screen. But hey, at least the center dot here isn't in a super low resolution this time. And don't worry, you might have noticed some pickup prompts or notifications burnt into the bottom left corner of the screen in some of my footage, but I promise it's just the game and not your monitor. Yeah, this is a really weird bug, and I don't really understand it, but for whatever reason, only sometimes, pickup notifications will persist in the lower left corner of the screen through gameplay, even staying after loading the game and getting progressively worse as more and more text burns into the corner. The HUD throughout the game looks great and is easy to use, but this is inexcusable. It's a really bad visual bug that seems very common, and again, I don't really understand how or why this happens. Keeping things positive though, the user interface scene in the game is fantastic, bringing a sense of personality and flavor to the menus you can click through. They're presented as monochromatic projection slides, like someone's flipping through the story in a debriefing or a classified military presentation, and I think it looks really cool. All of the menus throughout the game share this look, and I love it. It's a huge step up from the very basic windows and pop-ups in the New Order. They even burn out and fade if you stay in the menus too long. It's a really fun touch, and you can tell there was a lot of effort and thought put into how these screens appear for a player, past just giving you information that they want to convey, which they also do really well. Moving along to the audio side of things, again, it's all great and all positive notes from me. I'm not an audio engineer and I don't know much about how to make things sound right in a game, but man, things sound great in the new Colossus. The sound of a machine gun firing dozens of rounds a second, the hum and buildup of a laser weapon focusing its beam, the roaring engines of jets above you, everything feels heavy and proper. It's all blasting through the speakers to ground you, and it comes through to sell the experience to bring you deeper into the world, exactly as it should. Continuing on things to sell you on the world, the voice performances throughout the game again are fantastic. The main cast brings the proper energy to their characters, the melancholic and insightful commentary from Blasco, the rallying speeches of a leader in Grace, the quirky, scatterbrained genius seen in Roth. Everyone breathes life into the characters that they play and bring the character into the story along with them. Some more minor characters around the game do feel a bit dull, but the attention is focused on Blasco and his supporting cast, so I can excuse weaker performances that are seen in the peripheral of the experience because the main course is so good. Speaking of so good, the music in the game is top-notch. The soundtrack was again composed by Mick Gordon, an icon in the industry for his intense, industrial, and metal-inspired tracks, along with Martin Stig Anderson, another brilliant sound designer that fit in perfectly to help bring in the mood the new Colossus was going for. The best way that I could put it is that the music feels intentional. The highs of the score pick up with the violence and brutality in gameplay, and the lows fit in perfectly with the building tension or intrigue that might come through the story. Something that greatly helps both of these is the dynamic soundtrack seen in gameplay, changing or adding layers to a track to fit how you play, with the music rising in active combat or slowing down to creep alongside you in stealth. The music is always looking to complement what's on screen, and I think it does so in spades, fitting naturally and adding to everything throughout the entire game. Altogether, the new Colossus strikes out in a bold departure from its predecessor to create a more colorful image, a more violent fight, while improving upon its beautifully realized environments, all set to great sound design and music that feel right at home to match the fantastic visual style.
Come on in, old buddy. Sorry I made you wait.
In wrapping up the second video covering my thoughts on Machine Games' Wolfenstein entries, I've come to appreciate these two titles even more, especially the new Colossus. As a sequel, it delivers on being bigger, bolder, and an even more dramatic step to improve its main character by giving BJ Blazkowicz a tragic background, giving the player a glimpse into what made him the Nazi-killing machine that we see today, and lowering his defenses further than what we saw on the New Order, achieved by opening him up and breaking him down. While it might falter on keeping that momentum for the entire story, I think the intent sticks with the player to deepen the connection with Blazkowicz and expand his character past a superhuman badass, though it does also make him into an even cooler, even stronger, death-defying idol for the Resistance. In gameplay, the new Colossus adds on to what the prior entry gave a player and steps things up for faster, more aggressive, and violent gameplay to give a more fun and exciting experience, though lessening some decision-making to keep things moving along at a quicker pace, which can detract from my enjoyment of the core gameplay. The new Colossus does succeed in being a sequel to me, as it stands as a fantastic next step for the change Machine Games wanted to see in the genre and how they managed to evolve a decades-old franchise. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far in the video, consider subscribing to see more from me in the future. Next up will be something different from Wolfenstein because, I will admit, I'm getting a little fatigued talking about Nazis and American revolutions in these games with everything going on in the real world. But I promise Youngblood will be coming up after whatever is next. This video took a bit longer than I would have liked, and I apologize for it coming right at the end of the month, but hey, not like anyone's holding me to it. Regardless, I'm going to try to make up for that with a quick turnaround on the next video and the next entry in the Machine Games Wolfenstein entries. So again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you for the next video.